Welcome to the Pathways to Success. I'm Julian Placino, recruiting professional turned success speaker, show host, and media entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to helping you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations that educate, inspire, and transform. Together, we'll interview some of the world's greatest leaders and uncover their secrets to success. Thanks for tuning in, and on to the show.
Welcome to episode 199 of the Pathways to Success, where we help you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations with the world's greatest leaders. I'm Julian Placino, your host, and we have a great show in store for you today. Today's episode is brought to you by City Central. City Central offers innovative workspaces for your business to thrive. City Central offers everything from private offices and co-working space to virtual offices and meeting rooms. City Central has 5 convenient locations in DFW, including North Dallas, Plano, Uptown, Richardson, and Fort Worth. If you use the promo code PATHWAYS, you get 50% off your first 3 months. So if you are looking for an innovative workspace for your business to thrive, check out citycentral.com for a free tour and use the promo code PATHWAYS to get 50% off your first 3 months. So before we introduce our featured guest today, I have to give a huge shout out to everyone here tuned in to the live stream. If you're watching us on Facebook, head over to YouTube, type in my name, Julian Placino, and join us in the chat. It's just a little bit easier to navigate through conversations and comments in one screen. I am very excited to introduce our featured guest, Dunn Glacy, CEO Chair at Vistage Worldwide. Worldwide. Don, welcome to the Pathways to Success. How are you, man?
I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely,
Great.
Absolutely.
And too blessed to be stressed. That's how I like to say it.
I love that. I love that. And Don, I feel like this is a long time coming because I look back at our email threads and we met, I think, beginning of January 2020. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We met at an event that I was co-hosting, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and a shout out to
you couldn't get rid of me.
I couldn't get rid of you, and truly your influence on my entrepreneurial career and my life is very much evident. So thank you very much for that, and I'm glad that you're here.
Oh, praise God for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Don, I want to jump right in to create some context for our audience and for our listeners. You are a CEO chair at Vistage Worldwide. Tell us, what is Vistage?
Vistage is, simply put, the best platform to help leaders become better leaders, make better decisions, and get better business results. Having been a member for 12 years and now running groups, it's been the biggest catalyst for business success, let's say, in my career, and being able to take over a family business, build another business, sell multiple companies, and it's my platform, really, to do for others what was done for me.
And I know you have sort of an atypical journey with Vistage. You were like the youngest member at 25. So tell us a little bit about how you first came into contact with the organization. What's that story?
Sure. So in college, my education's in business, but concentrating on information systems and statistics. Woo, super fun. And the capstone course, we had to do a live information system study, and we needed hand raisers to find live companies to go do that with. And I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family, and so I said, sure, I'll go find one. And I reached out to my girlfriend, who was working at a $50 million warehouse transportation company in Santa Ana, California, and I said, hey, we're doing this project. We'll bring in some MBAs and a professor and do all these things. Well, we did that, and it was a great project, but I met the CEO there, Scott Henderson, and he and I just kind of connected, and like you, he couldn't get rid of me, right? And so I came back to him one day with a business plan and what inevitably became another business that we started. And he said, you need to be in this thing called Vistage with me. And that was a big inflection point. We had a speaker early on that said, look back over your career and look at the inflection points of what you've done and write down what was the catalyst, what was that thing that did that. And every single inflection point, not just for me, but my fellow members in the room, was mentorship. And somebody saying, here, let's do this, right? And pouring into people. And so I just get to sit on a bunch of people's shoulders and call myself tall. Yeah.
So here is actually what I thought was very interesting about you, Don, especially preparing for this conversation, reviewing sort of your career. You started your first business at 16.
Yep.
You sold it at 19.
Yep.
Youngest Vistage member at 25. Created the first ever 24/7 marketing execution center, whatever that is, right? And doing all these things. I thought that entrepreneurship was just a natural talent, ability, and gift, which I still think it is. But when you talk about your own journey to success, you're very passionate and give so much credit to your mentors. So I'm curious, how did that play into your development as a leader and as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I mentioned Scott. Scott, was the first kind of external business mentor. You mentioned entrepreneurial nature. I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. My mother started our ad agency, and she was really my first mentor. I think our parents are, in a lot of ways, our first mentor, role models. But she really took it upon herself to create an environment that challenged me and taught me a lot of things that play a big part of who I am today. And she, when Scott said you need to be in this thing called Vistage, I, came back and she said, you absolutely need to do this. What got us here won't get us there, and you've got to find external input. And so Scott brought me into a group in Southern California with Les Whitney, who's taught me just so much. And then having moved to Texas, Ken Stibler saw something in me, and way sooner than I thought I should be doing what I'm doing now, he said, you need to think about this. And I didn't really know why, and I had all the excuses why not to do it. And then I ran out of them when I exited my businesses. And I said, all right, I'll go check this thing out called, chairing a group. I've been in Vistage groups as a member, so I thought I knew everything there was about that. And something happened in getting into that first academy session at Vistage, where you got to see really what happens and how you serve people as a chair, and that really spoke to me. And Ken was just chuckling when I got back, because he said, "Why do you think I suggested this for you?" And I don't know. He said, "What do you love about the companies that you were running?" I said, "I love developing my people." Getting the right, Jim Collins says, get the right people in the right seats on the bus.
Yeah.
But that's not a one and done, right? You got to continually lead your people, because the people are your culture, the people are your business, right? And the better you can do that and take care of them, they take care of the business. And so he knew that, and he knew just my passion for meeting people and saying, what makes you tick, Julian? And then finding opportunities just to challenge, to encourage. And really, yeah, I think that's the right way to say it. Mentors are really that you can't find them per se. They find you. I think they're really a natural means of grace that the Lord brings us, and in the right moments, in the right time. And you don't really, on the other side of the fence too, if you're mentoring somebody, you don't really know that you're doing it. You're just doing it. Does that make sense?
It does.
Anyway, it's magic. And it's just the way we're wired, is to help each other. Did I answer your question?
It did. You did. Thank you very much.
You asked me
for
what time it is. I'm going to tell you how to build a watch. So just
No,
wave
good.
the yellow flag.
I definitely want to talk more about the Vistage group, because there are some things that are unique about yours in particular versus others that I want to unpack. But you mentioned your mother was your first mentor. What would you say is the most significant lesson that you have learned from her?
Oh, I call it 1090. So, as you know, I'm a big fan of culture, and we can talk about what that means and all that. The last company I built was a very culture-driven business, and I'll explain why, but our second core value was a core value called 1090. And it was what my mom had always, I don't know that she explicitly taught me this, but she taught me this through her life and her actions. Is life is 10% what happens to you, right? Just things that happen, and 90% how you choose to respond. Think about that. The power is in the response, right? There's only so many things we can control in our lives that happens. And you have a choice. You can either play the victim in the passenger, if you will, of your own life, or you can take ownership of it and choose your response. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she modeled that more than she said it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that she did in my life, is she lived out her ethos, her ethic, which was namely to serve her two boys, me and my brother.
I think that's a great piece of advice, especially now amid everything that we have gone through.
Yeah.
So it is in the response, and just like the great quote by Viktor Frankl said, in between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our ultimate freedom, and it is our freedom to choose.
Amen.
And it seemed that very much your mother lived that and passed that down to you, so that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So John, your Vistage group, intellectually, I could speak about it before, but recently I participated in a meeting, went through the processing, and that was an incredible experience. But what is unique specifically about your Vistage group, John?
What's unique? Every single one of the members are unique. I mean, so I don't think I gave you a full explanation, but Vistage really, what the group is it's a peer advisory group. So we have business owners, CEOs in the room, really helping each other solve business issues, CEO to CEO. And that's very unique. Usually that position is the only position that doesn't have a horizontal peer in the org chart.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Right? So when you go to try to solve a problem, you can go to staff, you can go to paid professionals, You can do those things, but there's just a certain level of bias maybe on both sides of the fence when you do that, and a level of experience too. When you have a CEO level issue, the best people to get feedback from are other CEOs. It just naturally makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that's the power of the group is they serve each other. I'm just there to get the right people in the room, and I'm glad you had a great experience. We've got a we use DISC profile as a personality profile. We have nearly 100% Ds, the drivers, high energy, type A's.
I saw that
and
list.
It's difficult to be in that room sometimes, right? But you get maximum energy, maximum input, and I hope that's was your experience.
You know what? And I've been very public with my audience. I left corporate America March of 2019, and being an entrepreneur, doing the kind of business that I am, you sort of feel like you're in a vacuum, right? You're trying a bunch of different things. It's sort of hard to get feedback. But being in that room, coming into that room with a specific issue and asking these brilliant minds, hey, I want to do this. And then everyone coming at you with questions, with clarifying questions, with suggestions and solutions. I mean, it was so amazing. And we walked out of there with so much clarity on what I need to do next. And that, I think, is just an invaluable experience for leaders and CEOs to be able to have. Because like you said, there's no lateral peer group in that org chart.
Yeah, that's right. So you asked me the question, what makes the group unique?
Yeah.
Because I'm a little bit... I've got some unique context within the Vistage community. So there's 800 chairs throughout the country, 23,000 plus members, right? I've been a part of 4 different groups and now running my own groups. And so I have that as a bit of context. Most chairs have not been members, I found, and that's interesting, and I feel like that gives us a different perspective. I'm also, obviously much younger at 38 years old, just having, I think, a lot of accelerants through mentors in my life to get us here. But our group also is, very high-tech, very forward-looking, and have a growth mindset for the next 10 to 20 years on average.
Yeah.
It's a different perspective and just a different group feel when everybody's really looking to grow and create transferable assets for legacy, but they have so much runway to do it. It's not like, hey, we need to figure this thing out and exit in 2-3 years, that happens, and that's okay. But it's just the dynamic of the group changes a little bit when you have more of runway to dream and to have vision and to work on some really cool strategic issues, particularly in this crazy dynamic.
Yeah.
I mean, we launched a group in the middle of a pandemic. That's different.
Yeah.
How many groups can say that, right? Not many. And that gives you a different level of mindset. Mindset is tremendously important for leaders. And I feel like that's a big element that we work on in the group is mindset. We like to say it's lonely at the top, and getting that peer-to-peer feedback is tremendously valuable to process decisions, but also to be in a room there's complete safety, to be vulnerable, to be open, say, I got this issue. When we're leading companies and staff, you can't always just show up and be like, hey, I got a problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a different context. And so that room provides a level of transparency to really get down to the root of what the decision needs to be, what the real question is. And that's part of the magic of the process that you experienced, right? Is you come with a, how do I question? How do I do this? And by the end of the process, that how do I, a lot of the times, has really changed to what you're really trying to do.
Yeah. So
did I answer your question?
You
I
did.
told you I would talk.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and that's great. And that idea of trust, and I know people have called you the trust curator, and I'm seeing this very much in terms of like your recruiting process for your team, and that's exactly what I did feel. I felt safe, and I felt I could be vulnerable, so I could share the good, the bad, the ugly about my business, so I could work forward towards the truth and build upon that. So, John, before we take our commercial break here, where you and I have connected is very much in our values. So I'm curious, what is your vision for your particular Vistage group?
Well, that's a good question. So I have core values around the group. The vision part is really up to the members. The members build the group. I get the right people in the room, and the question becomes, what kind of group do you want? And that is a frequent conversation we have. One of the dynamics of a CEO group is we only have a single industry represented in each chair. So it's not a trade group where it's a homogenous group of industries. It's heterogeneous. So you're solving problems through these different perspectives, right? And so the constant conversation is, who else do you want in the room? From the chair perspective, you know, my vision for a group is 12 to 16 highly committed, highly transparent, growth-oriented, high integrity leaders that are there to go to battle together and really see it that way. You know, there's this proverb, I guess, that shows up on many of our meetings. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And I feel like my vision for a group is a group 5 years down the road. We just did I do an exercise called the 5-year letter, and they write me a letter as if we haven't seen each other for 5 years. And it puts you in this mode of, what do you want? So if I'm doing that to myself right now, in 5 years, I would love all these same people to be in the room, plus some extra, right? Some more, because we're not quite full yet. And I would love to see their businesses have all the success how they define it. And that's hard. And that's actually part of the problem, is how do you define success? So yeah, I'm focused on how do we get those people in the room that can be the best for each other. And that's my job. That's why I'm the trust curator, right? If I can maximize trust in the room, we can do the best work and get the best business results and personal results.
Yeah.
And be surprised how much the personal drives the business.
And I think that's what you did so masterfully during our session, is that you did not come up with the solutions. You sort of orchestrated the team to sort of come up with them and asking the right questions. So that is really great.
Yeah,
so Don, we're going to take a quick commercial break to hear from our sponsors, and more with Don Glacy when we return.
You want to transition out of your career and do something tech related. CodeUp is the place for you. When I came to CodeUp, I was actually working at a chain hair salon. It was just starting not to be for me anymore. My goals were to never work a weekend ever again, to have full health care and benefits, and to just have more time with my son. And now I've met all of those goals. I don't have any regrets. I just regret not coming sooner when I saw those billboards and I was driving down the highway.
And we're back with Don Glacy, CEO Chair at Vistage Worldwide. Don, before we jump into keys to success for your conversation, I have a small gift here for you, courtesy of our friends at Dead Soxy. So, I'm really proud of this, okay? So this is actually a custom design Pathways to Success sock by Dead Soxy. So thank you,
awesome.
Jason Simmons and Dead Soxy, for supporting the show. Check
Yes,
that out.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Also want to give a shout out to folks here tuned into the live stream. I see Ryan Ogden. Thank you for joining us. Looks like you have worked with Don in the past, so thank you for tuning in. So Don, I want to jump straight into keys to success. And what was advertised is that you have great insight into working with CEOs all throughout, and now post the pandemic. So I want to capture some of those lessons, and if you could share some observations. So of the CEOs who really did well and actually emerged stronger post-pandemic, tell us a little bit about that and what you have seen.
Sure. So in general, so I'll do some general speaking around it and then go to some specificity. I would say, again, circling back to mindset, the members that have really found opportunity in the chaos are the ones that showed up and said, I don't have all the answers, and provided the most amount of candor and curiosity and transparency around what's going on in their individual businesses so that we can solve problems. Just one that comes to mind, one of our members said, you know, I'd really like to do this, but capital is, being protected right now, and I'm worried about this and I'm worried about that, and my banks aren't doing anything about PPP. And we were able to have another Vistage member solve that problem.
Wow.
That owns a bank that knew this story inside and out and just was the right person at the right place that got connected to our member. And because she was vulnerable enough to say, I really need to get more capital, right? Which isn't intuitive, right? So when you're in business, we like to think that we have it all figured out, right? But in that room, you get to just be you and really bring the need. And the ones that brought the need quickest, and I'd say I keep going back to the word transparent. Being most transparent with the group got the most help. And so some observations post-COVID, let's say, right? Even though it's ongoing, it's here.
Yeah.
But I call it post because since the beginning of the year, this group, so we launched in the pandemic, right? So we launched September of 19, this particular group that you were, I'm sorry, September of 20, this particular group that you were party to. And that was the first event was an on-site event, and then we went, that was January of 20. February was the executive summit where all members come to the convention center, and it's a big deal, big show. And then March, bam, lockdown, right? So the members that were only in one meeting, they remember maybe that one in person, but then it was Zoom throughout. And it was really neat because the group elected to do bi-weekly meetings. So normally we meet monthly, but during the pandemic, they said, no, let's help more people by having more events. So we did bi-weekly half-day meetings over Zoom, and just whoever needed help, we brought it. And that was a really cool dynamic of this group. I'm like the proud papa, right?
Yeah.
But post-COVID, I would say that they're just ready to go. There's been this pent-up demand, not just from the members in emotional being pent up. I need to get out of this house. I need to, whatever that looks like for them. But business too. I mean, a lot of members have their issues are, I have too much business, which is amazing to see. But because they didn't go into full lockdown or, panic mode, and they were able to get past the fear, right? Because that's whenever there's massive change in anybody's life, fear creeps up, and fear blocks our ability to make decisions because we then become more protectionists, and our fight or flight is triggered, and just there's a totally different person that shows up. But the members that got the help were able to stay out of that fear mode and really move forward in faith and confidence. Partly because they have, this team with them, this group that I think brings a lot of that confidence. And so now they're able to leverage that investment, if you will. If you look at the during COVID lockdown, they made strategic changes to not cut into muscle. They trim fat, but they position themselves well to capitalize now on this growth. And that's neat. That's neat to see. The other thing I'm seeing too just is the members are now, I think, a little bit more empathetic and in tune with their staff. Because they had to be, right? Everybody goes remote. If you've never done remote, that's different. That changes your culture. And the members did a really good job, by and large, of staying connected to their staff, more so than maybe they ever have been when they were seeing them every day in the office. And getting to that different level of understanding with their members was not just valuable from a one-to-one basis, but actually strengthened their company cultures. And seeing how they operate now, post-COVID, is fascinating.
There is a word that keeps coming up in our interactions and something I keep hearing in the group. It is humility and also vulnerability. And I just reread Jim Collins's Good to Great, and every one of those companies that were good to great companies, that transition had what was described as a level 5 leader, which one of the top characteristics was humility. I'm curious, because you see this in and out and working with some of the best out there, why do you think it is so important for leaders to cultivate humility?
Well, I think humility has a level of authenticity to it. And to be able to lead by saying, I don't have all the answers and let's figure this out together, has a different level of buy-in. You know, most companies in the United States are service-based businesses, and they, as a result, are usually doing a lot of complex activity, complex work per role. And you can no longer silo and just create the algorithmic work, right? You've got to have team collaboration. Another good book, Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal, talks about his observations of this in the military and what he did there, and now applying to business best practices. Similar to that, where the members are working with their staff, making sure there's cohesion, and their effectiveness at doing that really correlates with their ability to just be humble, but I'll use maybe authentic as an alternative to that. And not just everything's normal, everything's fine, right? Because when the world is changing around you, if you're not reacting to that and not being a little humble and you act like everything's fine, well, everything's not fine. Now you're the weird one, right? You're the one that's just putting on the show, right? And that came out, I think, a lot with COVID is, can I empathize? Can I relate to my leader, my manager? People don't leave corporations. They don't stick to corporations. They stick or leave managers. The people that they're having to report to and really put a lot of faith and trust in. So imagine that. Your paycheck, your livelihood is connected to this person that's senior to you. If that person is not humble, the amount of anxiety that you operate in is not good. And I already alluded to this, but when you're anxious and you're triggering your fight or flight responses on a daily basis, and cortisol is through the roof, right? And all these things that are going on chemically in your body, it reduces productivity. I mean, if you want to get down to it, if you want to get down to a KPI, that's what happens, but you're also eroding your culture at the same time. I mean, humility is, you could argue, is a value that many have in their core values as a company, but it translates to the individual. Core values usually reflect the values of leadership, right? To answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So before we switch gears onto our next topic here, what would be the best advice that you could give CEOs, learning everything that we have from the pandemic to be more effective leaders?
Well, I'll resist the urge to say, join a Vistage group. Well, that's a hard one. Understanding what success looks like for them personally as a leader, as well as the business. I think, we fall victim as CEOs into just hard charging, being highly driven, highly competitive even, and maybe losing sight of why you do what you do. And I think COVID actually helped people kind of knock out of autopilot and start asking those questions.
Yeah.
What's the best thing a CEO could do? Culture, 100% culture. You know, the quote I walk around with every day is, culture isn't the number one thing, it's the only thing. Going back to Jim Collins, he talks about the hedgehog concept. What's that thing that's always going to keep you in a competitive mode, right? And I won't unpack the whole story because we'll run out of time, but the hedgehog concept is, what's that one thing that is your competitive advantage that nobody else can beat you on? Yeah. And there was a speaker that I had as a member back in 2002 that said, the advent, I'm sorry, 2008. And he said the advent of the internet has made everybody compete with everybody. And as complex of an engineering marvel as the iPhone or whatever, I forget the example he used, but all these engineering marvels are now replicated within weeks, maybe days, of somebody releasing a new item, right? And so what becomes your competitive advantage? What's your hedgehog concept? And the only thing left in that framework, in that context, is the culture that you are putting forward for your company, or it could be your biggest anchor. Everybody has a culture, whether they are intentional about it or not. It's the environment you create within your company. It's the worldview, I like to say, of how the business operates. So I'd say walking around the tree a little bit here with my answer, but the number one thing really is to reevaluate, redefine the culture for your organization that maps to what you want the organization to do. Yeah. And then tie it into everything you do. Measure against, and culture gets a bad rap because it's kind of, and I can say this as a millennial, culture, it's all, it could be looked at as just this flippant, feel good type of word that, we need a corporate culture so I can wrap this blanket around me and feel safe every day. That's not it at all.
Yeah.
And you let me go, I'll keep going.
No, it is. And I want to ask, I want to stay with that idea, but I also want to give some love here to people in the live stream. I see Lindsay Christian says, sounds like he has a real passion for people and their success. Thank you for that. Raj Daniels, previous guest of the show, thank you for tuning in. He says, culture is the absolute best moat. So Raj, thank you very much for that comment here. So Don, if there was one piece of advice that you could give our audience in attendance in terms of what they could do to start to begin to improve their culture or whatnot, what's that piece of advice?
Well, for us, in the last company I built, that was the most culture-driven company I've ever been a part of personally. Yeah. And we were intentional about that because we realized what we were selling was, could be looked at as a commodity in a lot of ways. The first thing we did was we asked the question, what are the best role models of the culture that I want to emulate? That's the best thing. Like, as smart as we like to think we are, a unique idea is unique to us, but likely been thought through before. And from a culture standpoint, we elected to follow Zappos. Zappos was bought by Amazon for $1 billion, and one of the only acquisitions where they got to keep their name. And they bought them really, in my view, is to absorb and really grab onto how they serve their customer. Zappos is just, I think, the gold standard, at least when we founded that company in 15. And they actually export their culture best practices through something called Zappos Insights, and I highly recommend it. If you just want a lens into what culture looks like in a company and how they think through it and how they commemorate it and celebrate it, Zappos, you can't go wrong. Great book. I would read Delivering Happiness by the late, great Tony Hsieh. Yeah.
Okay.
So I would do that. It really comes down to the leader. Culture has to be driven from the chief decision maker of the organization. And really, as a result of that, there's a lot that comes from the values of that individual, but also the leadership team. But you want to find a company that really emulates, I think, what you want, and then ask the question why. And start to be your own citizen scientist and unpack why that company's good. So we didn't just exclusively, go after Zappos, we followed a lot of like Costco, for instance, which is the quote from James Sinegal that I use. We followed, the hotel chain that is just known for their best service. Help me, I'm drawing a blank.
Marriott, Hilton.
Just the top of the top, the Ritz.
Virgin,
The
Ritz. Okay, yeah.
And how they do customer experience. That was really our focus, is how do I make the best customer experience? That's what we really wanted to unpack. And so from a corporate culture standpoint, that led us to Zappos and the Ritz and some of these other companies. And so we grabbed pieces and parts and really made it our own. We adapted it to our own set of core values. And that's really the piece that was the magic for us. We had a company in an industry that normally has 100% annual turnover that had 13. Our company had 13% annual turnover. I believe because we put the culture at the top of the priority list, which is to say we put the customer at the top of the priority list. We did things like we created internally an upside down org chart. I was at the bottom, not the top. The customer was at the top. Things like that, and just how you create the iconography and the language around your company. When ancient Rome would go, sack a new country or whatnot, they lasted as a let's say an organization because they got that country on a common language, a common currency, a common religion, a lot of these commonalities. But what they're really doing is they're crafting a culture and maintaining a culture with a lot of intentionality. Now, I don't want to speak to the moral nature of the Roman Empire, but in terms of looking at it as an enterprise that lasted a good chunk of time. That's an analogy, but making sure your language is the language you want to be using, just the words. The words are a function of our thoughts, and the words we use become our actions, which become our habits, and that leads to our character. And so you can kind of see the magic circle of culture, but acting with intention of saying, how does this map to the culture? The core values became our ultimate field manual. We didn't have to script our people. They were in basically a call center-like environment. We never scripted them. We gave them situational training on certain topics, but as long as they stayed within the bounds of our core values, they got to be free. Paul talks about this in the Bible. He says it's the law of liberty.
Yeah.
It's knowing the rules of the game that become freeing. And if you do that in a corporate sense in a company, and you can communicate that all the way down to how people are evaluated, all of our evaluation of our team, all the personal review, and we had weekly stand-up team meetings where we got to celebrate people for wins.
Yeah.
All the wins and all of the opportunities for improvement tied back to core values. Now, we didn't have all core values as KPIs per se, but we were very intentional at making sure that we were walking our talk. And that's where I think culture really gets valuable, is when it's more than just the poster on the wall. Humility, integrity, transparency, achievement, those are nice words, but how are you going to apply that to your people, your passion, and what you're doing, and your product?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what really is very interesting is that you said that you were in an industry that had how much turnover?
100%. Yeah, call center. Yeah,
It was
a 24/7.
Man, that's like about as I don't want to use a derogatory term, but like sort of a worker bee environment that naturally has a lot of attrition.
Yeah.
But the one thing you changed was culture, and that's
100%.
what made the difference.
Yeah, another unique providential thing. I love to say that we could take credit for all these great things, but one of the things that the culture helped us decide was, how do we want to work? And we were a virtual company well before everybody was virtual, right? We were completely remote from day one. Now we had these satellite offices because we were spread out over the country.
Yeah.
And we subscribed to these executive, office-based things for our people to go into and collaborate. They didn't want to. So we leaned full tilt into the culture of working when you want, where you want. We adapted a Uber-type model on the back end where people could literally just work whenever they want. And then we had a daily competition within each team cluster of the coolest place to live for the day. and inside of their private, Facebook groups that they used as the virtual water cooler, they would post these pictures of where they were working as kind of a one-upsmanship. And you got the average pictures were, the pool, the beach, the cool, garden, this type of thing. But once in a while, they would take a trip overseas somewhere, and we got pictures of people working from the Eiffel Tower. And this is, again, keep in mind that the culture around us is like, well, you've got a remote company, and that's a little strange. But once you explain the value to the internal customer, our staff, and that's how we saw them, right? So the customer is at the top of the org chart. Our internal customer is serving them. So we saw ourselves as servants to our staff, and using the culture to do that all the way around, even from remote work. And they gave them the ability to hand off projects and shifts and all sorts of things to each other. And the recipient that said, I'll take it. We had a core value called IGYB, I got your back. And they got rewarded, and they had their own internal reward system. Anyway, I could go on and on. But yeah, we had a very low turnover rate because we fully committed to serving the customer and the internal customer through our culture.
I'm a believer, Don. I come from talent acquisition. Hiring is all I've done for 12 years. And luckily, I have been a part of a number of companies that had great company culture, Bottle Rocket, one of them. But an amazing thing really starts to happen within an organization when you hire a group of people who share the same values and are all faced in the same sort of direction. And I absolutely believe that in terms of culture. So
I'm going to add one element to that too, and it was again, I've talked a lot about how the cultures can become the ethos of the leader. And again, I'd like to take credit for all these things, but who is really in the trenches with me on a daily basis to help me think through these things and help ask the right question in my leadership team was really my wife.
Really?
Lindsay, she was she was my Vistage group, if you will, in doing this in this group, and she's been amazing. We now actually take a lot of what you experienced in the Vistage group, like the issue processing, we do it around the dinner table. So in all these businesses that I'm touching, she's like, all right, what are we doing? And she's just in it shoulder to shoulder with me and is the best partner. And that's a big piece. I've talked a little bit about the alignment of personal and business. I mean, just having an advocate like that is unique. So thank you, baby, if you're listening.
I love that. Don, we're almost out of time here. I could keep going for as long as I wish that we could, but tell our audience how to connect with you, how to follow you, how to learn more about the group, and also you have a nonprofit here that you'd like to speak about as well.
Oh, yeah. So connect with me. LinkedIn is my primary platform that you see the show on, and you can find me on there, Donald Glacy, and happy to chat with anybody that just wants to chat. Message me. DonaldJGlacy.com is the website. But let's talk less about me. And we all carry pieces of our passion and our purpose with us. And from a pretty young age, my wife and I both volunteered for an amazing organization at the time called Royal Family Kids. It is now the parent organization is For the Children, and we serve roughly about 6% of the foster youth in America through summer camps, through mentorship programs, and really rich types of programs to help these at-risk youth, these kids that are living a different life than you and I. Let's put it that way. And we were counselors, and I've been fortunate enough to serve on the board now for nearly a dozen years, and it's just my passion for kids. And when people ask me what I do, I like to say that I'm raising disciples in my own house. My kids are my legacy, right? And everything I touch and feel passionate about, again, because I was a kid and I had people care for me in certain ways. I think maybe that's the why. And For the Children is just, it's an incredible organization, I'll just say that. It's 30 years old, and we have some pretty exciting things that are coming about in the next couple of years.
And we'll make sure to link all that below, Don. So we're just about out of time. Don, this has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
I'm grateful to have been here. Thank you. Appreciate you.
And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success. If you enjoyed this conversation, please hit that subscribe bell, share this out with people that you know. And as always, if you'd like to work with me personally and invite me to keynote on the topic of personal branding, leadership, or networking, you can send me an email to julian@julianplacino.com. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.